Greetings all. Hope you had a good holiday season. Getting set here with the new year. I'm going to be coming out with an apologetics study. Probably will be a series of videos, but covers the basics of apologetics and why it's important and all that. But that's going to take a little bit more time. I'm still reading some materials for that. In the meantime, I thought I would do a quick thing on the hummingbird, as Answers in Genesis just did a re-released an article a couple of days ago about the hummingbird. And these kinds of things are important, these unique animals, because they essentially fly in the face of anybody who believes in evolution. If you want to stump an evolutionist and listen to them go off on a big imaginary tall tale of the way things happened in their mind or what the textbook says, you ask them about a hummingbird and the evolution of like a giraffe or a penguin, and you find this sort of thing in every animal creature that you look at. Just about every creature does something fascinating that you wonder, how in the heck did that evolve? It's impossible. And the answer is, of course, that it didn't evolve. God made them that way, so that's why they do that. The hummingbird here, with this article, we get into it, talks about kind of, there's 300 species of hummingbirds, but everyone knows really what they do. You know, they can flap their wings like 50, 60 times a second, 50 to 80 beats per second. And this is the only bird that has this capability. It's curious as to like, how did that evolve? And the hummingbird eats nectar and flowers and things like that to keep the energy going, because it needs lots of food for that. Now, in the vein of irreducible complexity, you know, your scientist creationists will always go into your flagellum bacteria and its little rotor stator thing when they talk about irreducible complexity, but really it doesn't need to be that complex. You look at special features that these animals have. In the instance of the hummingbird, what evolved first? Was it the little beak that allowed it to get nectar, and then it just decided that it really wanted to be able to fly like a helicopter, so it evolved the ability to do that? Or were they able to fly around like a helicopter and just decide, I'm going to eat nectar? What evolved first, and how did that happen? What's the relative to the hummingbird? There's no idea. Evolutionists got no clue. And rightly so, because there isn't any links. There isn't any links anywhere. And if we continue on here, it says a person would have to eat the equivalent of 1,300 hamburgers to get the amount of calories that a hummingbird gets, and this is by weight, as well as 60 liters of water, because guess what? You would start on fire. According to this, our hearts, if we were a hummingbird, our hearts would beat 1,260 times a minute, and our body temperature would rise to 385 degrees Celsius, which is something like, 700 degrees and something, and we'd burst into flames. So how did this critter evolve? What just decided that it was going to be that way? Because there isn't even any other birds that are even close to this. Moving on here, God has equipped the hummingbird with a needle-like bill which penetrates deep into the flowers to extract nectar. If the corolla of the flower is too long, the bill can pierce it at the base to gain access. Hummingbird is also equipped with a long, specially designed tongue, which is curled up at the edges to form two troughs, which look like the number 3 on its back to hold the nectar. The tongue curls up and retracts to the back of the head. The bird takes 13 licks per second. When the tongue retracts in the mouth, the nectar is squeezed out into the throat. So this is a really quick bird. Really quick bird. Designed for flight. Well, in here it talks about the third of its body weight is basically its chest muscle, so it can fly around, and it can hover and fly at something like 55 miles per hour. And, they migrate hundreds of miles between Mexico and North America, and they live 5 years, and they're territorial. Yeah. Now, how do you explain this from an evolutionary standpoint? And this is just one animal. Where we live, we go up north and have a place up there, and got hummingbird feeders and stuff like that, and you watch these things, and if you look at that, I don't know how any scientist or someone who calls themselves learned could look at that and say that, oh, that happened by random chance. It's ridiculous. And we're not even getting into the biology of it. Because really, when you're talking about your evolutionary branches in your trees and all that made up fantasy stuff, the heart is completely different. The wing structure and the muscles and everything and the beak is all completely different between a hummingbird and all the rest of the birds. And you could say this about a lot of different species of birds. I mean, woodpeckers are another great example. Woodpeckers have a totally different mechanic going on than any other bird, too. You just can't explain this stuff through any sort of naturalistic process. It doesn't happen. And these are the kind of examples that I like to use where an evolutionist person wants to go on, or like typically it would be a just a layman or someone who believes in evolution because that's what they were taught in school. And it's like, well, can you explain the evolution of something like a hummingbird or a giraffe? Another giraffe is another great example to bring up because there is nothing like a giraffe anywhere. Evolution really can't explain it at all. The biology and physiology and everything for a giraffe is like no other critter. So what do you got? Came out of nowhere. Also, beyond this article, I'll probably just briefly touch on it here. The, where is it? Came out today. Geomagnetic reversals? No. Must have been here. Here we are. Most notable fossil news. So in 2014, they found a bunch of more fossils in their various digs. And this is covering some of the bullet point highlights. We're going to be dealing here with evolution again, which I'm probably going to be moving away from, as I said, and more into a straight apologetics thing. But what the problem is here is an evolutionist will always say, well, you know, we don't have mammals in with the dinosaurs, so that means that their geologic column is true. And it's the same old thing that I always say is I have a coffee cup that protects me from tiger attacks. You don't see any tigers around, therefore it must be working. That's the same sort of logic. So what they're doing here is they're categorizing the various finds. And it says here, in March, scientists reported fossilized plant chromosomes. Fern DNA. Now, DNA cannot last that long. People want to say that, you know, iron supposedly preserved the dinosaur DNA. Which I think I have a couple of videos that reference that. Mary Schweitzer's Dino DNA in the bones, saying, well, you know, iron just made it possible. And if that was true, your cars would never rust, right? If iron actually had these mythical properties of preserving stuff. So, anyways, here in a fern shouldn't have stuff like iron in it because it doesn't have blood, right? Here they say they've got fossilized plant chromosomes and fern DNA fossilized inside exquisitely preserved cells after 100 million years, 180 million years. So now we not only have 65 million year old dinosaur stuff that says, oh, it's preserved because of the iron in the blood, preserve the blood cells, preserve the tissue. Well, here we've got DNA, and it's buried in 180 million year old layers of dirt. Huh. So here's one example for all those people out there that want to talk about, you know, we're not out of place fossils don't exist. Everything is perfectly lined up in the geologic column. It's BS. It's BS. They don't report a lot of them. You'll never see them on the cover of Time, but they're out there. So we'll move on. Stenopodidians are some kind of a shrimp. They lost their legs, blah, blah, blah. They found them. We're talking about some shrimp thing they found. So researchers found shrimp in Jurassic system rocks, but the new discovery instantly inflated the conventional age range of those wonderfully stable creature forms from 360 to 360 million years. So they found them in the wrong layer, so they have to reclassify them after they've been there for, you know, since the beginning of the geologic column. Another arthropod broke evolutionary mold of constant change by remaining the same after 52 million supposed years. And here's the other big problem there with evolution is it requires change. In order for your genome not to become stagnant and mutated into, you know, what do they call that when everything dies off? And in order for an animal species not to get wiped out, it is required to change. Just due to genetic mutation alone. It has to change. It can't stay the same. And so you've got all of these things that are called living fossils that haven't changed in 52 million years. And this is actually really young. There's living fossils that are something like 300 million years old, as in they're in a layer of rock they say is 300 million years old, but the exact same animal still lives today, unchanged. Down here, relating to the mammals in the dinosaur layer, they found squirrel-looking critters in Cambrian rock in China. Imagine that. Huh. These amazing fossils now join a growing list of modern animal forms found in the same strata as dinosaur fossils. And I always hear about how they never find any. I always do. That's always the number one comment. Geologic column is bunk. It's bogus, BS, total junk. And it's moronic to believe it. And I assert that point, and they'll always say, well, they never find any out-of-place fossils. Well, that's garbage. They do, all the time. So it's the growing list of modern animal forms found in the same strata as dinosaur fossils. Now we're going to list some of the ones that they found, including Tasmanian devils, tree shrews, beavers, and groundhogs. Have squirrels been squirrels since the very beginning? Fossils say yes. See, in the evolutionary timescale, mammals aren't even supposed to be here yet until a few million years ago. Mammals are supposed to be the most recent thing. And then people are like a couple 100,000 years. Yeah, they say people evolved from chimps in a couple 100,000 years. Wow. And they say they call me an idiot. Holy buckets. Two more 2014 discoveries really astonished those interested in the growing number of what Charles Darwin called living fossils. So here we're going to talk about living fossils a little bit, including some possible time record breakers. Ooh, let's hear about this. Researchers investigating the seafloor worm fossils from Russian boreholes found intricate tissues exactly matching those of today's beard worms. I don't know what a beard worm is, but let's keep going here. This would come across as no shock, and the fossil were only a few thousand years old, but its 550 million year age assignment shatters credibility. Yeah, so you got worms that haven't evolved in 550 million years. Million years. And the evolutionist will say that's because the worm evolved as far as it could possibly go. In our final example, biologists discovered mushroom-like animals alive on the seafloor off Australia's southern coast, then matched these newfound body forms to known fossils from Ediacaran rocks bearing the conventional label of 550 million years. We asked when reporting this find, how will secular biologists explain that evolution had no effect on it for over the course of 550 million years? So, yeah, these animals are still alive today, and they're no change in 550 million years. Yep. None of the evolution Darwinists expected showed up in these newly discovered or newly extended living fossils. Instead, each find confirms the Bible record of God having created the creatures to reproduce after their own kinds from the beginning, not that long ago. That's a really poorly written sentence, but despite that, I like covering stuff like this. Evolution happens, but it doesn't happen. It's the old theory that molds into whatever you want it to. Oh, the earthworms are the same today because they're as evolved as they can possibly get. Well, according to the tree of life, that's not possible, right? You got to have branching off or something and mutations, creating new stuff, right? I mean, that's the only way they're going to have to describe the hummingbird that we looked at here, is some sort of punctuated equilibrium sort of thing, with a little bit of Lamarckism in there, where the hummingbird decided that it'd be really convenient if it could get the ability to fly like a helicopter, because that would make sucking the nectar out of the flower a lot easier. You wouldn't have to fly straight through the flower that way. So with that, I think we're going to be out of here in the next couple of days. Like I said, I'm going to be doing an apologetics thing that'll be a little bit more formal than this. This was just a brief look at some of the new info that's out there from Answers in Genesis. Kind of ramping myself back up into doing these vids. So until next time, we'll see you later.